the one that that sparked this club. Okay, welcome everyone to Zulu Shooters Club Zoom public meeting. I'm Sean Yassine, president of Zulu Shooters Club in St. Louis, Missouri. Let me start by giving a shout out to some of the St. Louis, Missouri clubs and organizations. I'm gonna start off with Prime Protection STL. They do CCW, firearms training, and they also got holsters now. The next one is Townsend Defense. If we see Everett, he has firearms and rifles training classes and also CCW classes. And also he do Krav Maga, hand-to-hand combat. Yes, sir. And we all need that, most definitely. So another person I want to give a shout out to is Caleb of Columbia, Missouri. He was a member of Zulu. He started the Sharp End Gun Club in Columbia, Missouri. Man, I'm telling you, of course our keynote speaker, Kevin Dixie, KD of NOC. Okay, man, I'm telling you, in St. Louis, we got a nice two-way community. I'm just saying, Black Power all the way. Unity in here, you know what I'm saying? So all them clubs, our next meeting, I want to get all us together and just have a big power out and let everybody know what we're doing in St. Louis and how we come together. So we'll have all of them speak on our next meeting. And so I'm gonna let Shannon, my wife, give y'all the history of Zulu and NAG.
Okay. The National African American Gun Association, NAGA, was founded by Philip Smith on February 28, 2015. To date, NAGA has nearly 85 chapters nationwide, including 3 chapters within Missouri: Zulu Shooters Club St. Louis, Sharp End Gun Club in Columbia, Missouri, and the KC NAGA Gun Club. Zulu Shooters Club mission is to focus on responsible legal gun ownership, knowledge of local gun laws, firearm safety training, self-defense and competitive shooting. We are a human rights organization that practices our constitutional rights that includes the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We want every African American to know that the Second Amendment empowers them to protect themselves and their community. Zulu Shooters Club motto: the ultimate weapon is not a loaded gun, but an educated mind. Furthermore, the Zulu Shooters Club strives to be civically engaged in the area of St. Louis, Missouri, by fostering social, educational, and cultural activities for the promotion of responsible and legal gun ownership through the spirit of education, service, fellowship, and further advancing the National African American Gun Association. Gerard.
All right.
Hope everybody.
Thank you, Shannon. So I've been given the unenviable task of introducing this guy. And first of all, calling him a gun guy is, that's almost an insult because he's doing so much more in the community. And for those whose lives he's touched, his name is Kevin Dixie, or KD as we call him. He is the owner-operator of No Other Choice Firearms Training. He is also the founder of Aiming for the Truth, which is whose mission is to heal broken families and get to the root causes of the issues affecting families, as well as the issues that affect our community. KD has taken his message far and wide. He is via a variety of media platforms, such as podcasts, speaking engagements, and media like NRA TV, as well as Time Magazine. Nice, KD. So thank you for blessing us with some time. So on top of all that, this educated husband and father, still finds time to engage us with conversation about firearms, freedom, and justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't see any ladies other than Shannon. Where are our ladies at? Please join Zulu Shooters Club as we welcome Kevin Dixie. Thank you, sir. The floor is yours. Let me get you mic'd up here. Stand by. There you go. It's yours.
All right, greatly appreciate the wonderful introduction. I'm humbled, and the pleasure is all mine. Anytime I can dialogue with my fellow brethren, the pleasure is mine. Can always make time for that. So thank you guys very much for the conversation and the invite. So I'm guessing that I'm here to give a brief introduction about myself, and I believe the primary focus after that, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, is to talk about the Truth series of guns and kind of where that idea came from and the history behind them. Right. So as long as there's no objection to that and I'm on the right course, I'll go ahead and get started. So I am a product of St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in various parts of the city, but I had my more formidable years. I grew up in Walnut Park, right there on the north side, on Genevieve and Harney, right between Genevieve and West Florissant. So I am a product of that environment, which I don't think is a bad thing. So when I decided to, since I was 15 years old, I've always did some type of advocacy work. Activism, even at my little young, tender, didn't know what the heck I was doing age. I always tried to figure it out. But it was more about human rights, civil rights, continuing the battle and understanding of civil rights, and mentorship and guidance of people in the area. Just let them know, have value in yourself. I wasn't a big fan of excuses. We can recognize the obstacles that are there and, be very clear about those. But I think that I've always been a fan of people having some accountability to themselves. So I always push people to be better. Misguided at times, I would admit, misguided at times, but I always push for people to do better, and that is coming from which I openly share my Aiming for the Truth program, which is where that kind of started. So my experience in life has been everything from rape and molestation, foster care, single mother household, sleeping in cars, the whole 9 yards. Nothing that anybody here hasn't heard or experienced themselves before, right? But that led to myself being diagnosed with clinical depression and clinical anxiety, which I battled for a few years. So when I took my activism and built it in with betterment of man, the reason why Aiming for the Truth focuses on those things is because I realized coming up in that environment, and it doesn't mean it's not happening in other environments. It was just my personal experience, but recognizing that it happens to people all around the country and around the world, actually, I was able to take that and turn that pain into power and take it from something that would have crippled a lot of people and gave them an avenue and a pathway to actually build stronger lives and fight through it. So that's where the Aiming for the Truth program came from. I mean, it's going around dealing with the things that I knew that was tearing our communities up. I'm not a big fan of blame this person or that person. The system is what it is. Once you recognize an obstacle, you don't stand there and blame the obstacle for being there. You figure out a way to defeat it. Like there's no point of you yelling at the brick wall that it's standing there, right? It's going to stand there until you do something about it. So I wanted to make sure that we got to the roots of violence, and we didn't allow ourselves to blame anything but the conditions that caused it. So understanding that there were a lot of people that grew up in the inner city, which it was kind of taboo to say, if you were, especially a Black man or a Black woman, to say that, you got something going on in your head that's not right. Any kind of mental disease was always kind of, tossed off as a white man's problem, right? It's not something we experienced because we were strong. We're not supposed to have problems. But I recognize that a lot of us didn't deal with our mental issues, which is why a lot of us were angry, right? And that's where that anger came from. And we just thought anger was a natural part of our upbringing. We are not angry people by nature. So that is absolutely not true. Do I think we're strong-willed? We're passionate. We can be loud naturally because we really mean what we say. Sure, all those things. But angry in the sense of just reckless and violent, I didn't think was a natural part of us. So I realized that there was a mental component to that we needed to address. So that's why I tell my story publicly about that. Fatherless households and all the different consequences that come from that. Being a person that experienced that firsthand and seeing what my friends and hundreds of others went through. How do we deal with the issues of that? But how do we actually get the dads who are now those 30, 35, 40, 45-year-old men to realize what they did was a mistake and place it back into the home? So to date, my program has been responsible for roughly about 120 fathers getting back involved with their children, and kind of snapping those generational curses that come from not having a dad around. Right? Clearly, are there tons and millions of success stories? Absolutely. But there are also millions of failures, right? And so how can we reduce those numbers and get more people to live in a successful life? And what about a lot of our young men, especially, not isolated too. All right, these aren't isolated problems, but just speaking from seeing what I saw, a lot of our young men didn't have employment skills. Right, so not that they weren't smart, not that they didn't want to do right, but I mean, how many men can we walk up to right now that are 40 years old and don't know how to tie a tie? It's just realism, right? Can't format a resume. That's real. That is not to embarrass anybody. That's just the way it is. But when you want to go, even if you have the the greatest heart and the best intentions, when you walk into any part of America, these are going to be some things they require of you: presentation of self, understanding how to represent yourself in writing and things of that nature. So I realized that a lot of these young men in particular, and even some of these middle-aged men, were frustrated because they couldn't understand why they couldn't get the fair opportunities they were asking for. And a lot of people were feeding them the whole victim mentality BS that, this ain't for you, the system's always gonna hold you down. And I'm like, yeah, that two things can be true at the same time, but you're not helping the situation because nobody's taking the time to actually show you some of those skills. Like, I like to tell people all the time, like, it's a great thing if you can be bilingual. That is awesome. But you need to also understand how to be bicultural. That's also important, right? So getting out there and giving them those skill sets and teaching them how to perform in those different markets where they can get those opportunities. And then helping people deal with, mothers getting their young men, especially these young boys that only have mom to look up to. And they tend to adopt some ways that I don't think that are appropriate for young men. And I wanted to make sure that we got those young men in opportunities where they can see positive men that look like them that actually do show up. So yeah, I'm sorry, dad's not there. He's not doing the right thing. But guess what? There is somebody that loves you and cares about you. And so how can we be a part of their lives and getting them into different things? Let's not just say go to the rec center and keep them in the same environment. Getting those boys linked in with the Boy Scouts, teaching them skills, how to hunt, how to fish, how to start a fire, how to, get outdoors and survive outdoors if they needed to. But the biggest thing besides giving them skills was changing their environment where they can actually get somewhere peaceful and let their little minds develop and grow. So doing all those things, the Aiming for the Truth program was born. We do those, I do those small different missions, sometimes one at a time. Every now and then I host a big event. And that's kind of the pride and joy where I come from. So that's why somebody saying, oh, you're a gun guy. I'm like, no, absolutely not. All right. Guns protect everything that we discuss. So I've traveled the country, done that program, done plenty of speaking. And also part of Aiming for the Truth is letting people know that we have to be able to interact and conduct ourselves with individuals we've been told we shouldn't. So one thing I did was I went out to Riverside, California recently, and I was part of a seminar called It's Needed. And that seminar is hosted by a brother that on Instagram goes by the name of Breaking Barriers United. He's a police officer out there in that area. Good brother. And I told him I needed to come out. He's having 3,000 law enforcement officials from all over the country come to that conference to listen and learn. And so I was brought out as a speaker, and I did. I got to educate hundreds of them on the viewpoint. And, to know me is, I'll get to my law enforcement experience here in a second, but it was to be able to give them a viewpoint that nobody ever really gave them without yelling, without it being a confrontation because something's bad happened and we're angry. Right? Just being able to actually have a conversation in an educational format. But even with that, through Aiming for the Truth, I'm able to talk to, and this just wasn't the people that work at the desk. These were the sergeants, the commanders, the probation and parole leaders, the local city mayors, the school principals, the superintendents. These were the leaders. And I got a chance to educate the leaders about how to go back and talk to their subordinates about some of the communication skills, some of the things they can do better, and looking at things through the lens of our eyes, and especially our young men and what they're going through, how you looking at that. So able to help them out, still keeping communication with a ton of them today, and proud to say that a lot of them have changed the way that they interact with young minority men in general based off that conversation we've had. And so now there are opportunities and doors open where I'll be traveling the country here in the next year or so, going to different police and law enforcement agencies and schools and giving them a firsthand perspective of how they should be communicating and at least understanding where the person is coming from that you're approaching and some of the handicaps that they're going through in life. So that's what the Aiming for the Truth program is about. It's about reducing violence. That way we can all become better pillars of society and giving people opportunities. So that all started when I was 15 years old. When I turned 21 years old, I went and took a job at the St. Louis City Police Department in the Prisoner Processing Division. And that's where I got introduced the proper way. You know, there's always the right way to do things. I got introduced the proper way into firearms. And from there, it became kind of an addiction. The guns for me before were always not always a negative thing per se. A lot of times they were neutral. But the first time that I actually handled a gun, I tried to kill myself. Well, I thought about killing myself, rather. That was all part of the clinical depression and anxiety. So the first time I encountered a gun, I had dreams after I shot it. I had dreams of it making all the pain go away. And that was another thing with Aiming for the Truth, while we help people try to reduce that amount of suicide and things like that, and talking to them firsthand accounts. So my first, like, hey, this ain't about banging or, you know, hurting yourself or hurting somebody else innocent. Educational experience when I got at the PD. And it was a good experience. It was a real good experience. And I became addicted, literally, to the firearm, like that moment when I walked in that room. The baby of the group of 5 instructors had 30 years of experience in that room. And I asked every single question I could think of. And from there, I got the opportunity to not only train at the academy, train with various units around the country, various instructors, tons of conversation, because I could talk about this every single day at work, put into the real life practice and all those kind of things. So eventually I started my own training program because I was able to work with some of the best instructors and the best syllabus writers and teachers in the country, right? To really understand and bring things full circle. And so I started my own training program called No Other Choice. The No Other Choice philosophy is simply based off my experience seeing a lot of good people, a lot of them that look like most of this panel, that were making decisions in their life that was costing them their lives, right? And a lot of these decisions weren't being made out of malice. They were actually being made out of ignorance. They thought that self-defense was common sense. So I noticed that a lot of people were using various weapons, not just guns, but guns being a part of it, to defend themselves. You know, one of my favorite statements is, oh, they punched me, so I shot them. Like, that was something that simple that happened a lot. And my job was to look into the eyes of individuals and close that door on them. And I could see the life sink out because they know 25 of their life is gone, right? So firsthand, not 1 or 2 people, thousands of people that I've dealt with that have watched years of their lives go away. And I had to watch the energy. I had to watch the families crying, beating on the glass, trying to get to them. I had to watch these men contemplate suicide. I had to keep them from killing themselves. I had to listen to them talk about how they're going to miss their children. I had to listen to moms, you know, asking, you know, their dad's not even around. Now, who's going to take care of them? Because I'm going to go away probably for the rest of my life or 10 years of my life because I made a foolish mistake. And so what I wanted to do is bring educated and informed way of preventing that from happening, coupled with all the professional experience and the life experience that I had. And thus No Other Choice was born. So I started educating people about, hey, let's make sure you're at a point of no other choice before you ever cause a negative impact on another human life. Even if they deserve it, extend God's grace and mercy to others as you will want to extend it to you, as long as you don't allow yourself or another innocent person to be hurt in the process. We're going to couple that mentality with the proper education and the proper skill set. And that way, you understand the philosophy isn't pull it, you better use it. You know, we about murder, death, kill. No, we're about no other choice. We're about being educated, calm, rational, but ready individuals. And that's what we should be doing. Because I wanted to see those amount of people that were being arrested and coughing their lives up kind of, you know, go away. So, and that's not even counting the financial burden they put on a lot of families, putting up their homes and losing their houses. And it was a mess. It was a mess. And I got to see it firsthand for 10 years. And I just wanted that to kind of stop. I wanted to do something about that. And so that's where the firearms training came from. And I've had the privilege of going from doing everything from teaching 4-year-olds up to teaching some of the best in the world, from running the ranges with some of the best in the world. Some of it public, some of it not. Some of it we talk about, some of it we don't. I've been in most ranges that people, you know, dream about. I remember watching YouTube 15 years ago and seeing some of these guys that have been at this for a while. And now I got their personal cell phone numbers and we talk on a regular basis. So seeing some of those things evolve and develop was you know, humbling for me, you know, and not only for them to recognize the fact that I care about mankind, and I also have a very, very deep love for people, what I consider, you know, my people, which are still Americans, but I love them all the same. But I have an infinite kind of love for individuals that I know understand my lifestyle, understand where I come from. I understand where they come from. It's just a different kind of feeling. But also recognize my skill set and what I'm capable of doing, and having the humbleness to know that I can always learn more. So being welcome in some of the best ranges, some of the best guys to do it on some of the biggest platforms it's been great. It's been fun. And so the training has been a great part of what I've done. I like to say that I was the little advocate and the life coach that fell in love with guns. My epiphany was all the history I studied from even being a kid. Whenever my mom always told me, remember, when you go to school, you're learning his story, not history, right? So when I started to do my own history, this is back when you had to go to the library. You couldn't just Google it, right? Started to do my own studying. I realized that a lot of the things that I was having these conversations with the old drunks on the block or some of the elders on the block or yelling at my friends about them, I realized it was just a aha moment. I realized when I learned firearms that a whole lot of the atrocities that occurred that I was studying, a lot of these atrocities were because people didn't have arms and they didn't understand. And that led me to studying what gun control was, what it was, and where it came from, how it developed, who it impacted. And it led toward this kind of mission, right? To couple the two, along with education, to make sure that we never repeated the things that occurred before. So that was how I kind of blended the two lifestyles together. And as far as I got, to where I'm at, it was probably 4 years ago, man. Maybe 4.5 years ago. I don't think more than 5, but up in that ballpark somewhere. I was in Utah. I was doing a training class in Utah, actually, for a TV show. It's my first time being on television. And I'm out there doing, something for a TV network. And I remember talking to a couple of the dudes that were out there, and they were asking me questions, and a couple of women started asking me questions on set. And it was just like, why? The producer knew, because that's why they brought me out there. Like, why doesn't more people know about this? And you know what? Because I didn't say it. I never got out there and said it. So I decided to go into the back of a hotel in the middle of nowhere, Utah. It was just a hotel and a spot to get some chicken wings. That was it. And I decided to go into the back of a hotel and do a video right off my phone explaining to Black men why they need to understand their right to bear arms. That video, just recorded off my phone, started me down my path. And then fast forward, I've been on many countless television shows, internet, TV-based stuff a lot. Like Time Magazine was a big deal for me because I always remember Michael Jackson being on the cover of Time. So, that was a real big deal for me. And seeing how that made my mom proud, going from a son that was supposed to be in prison to a son that's on the cover of Time Magazine was a big deal. And doing a lot of cool stuff, a lot of fun stuff. And my kids can look up and say, that's my dad. My son got to see me speaking on Capitol Hill. He got to see me have the same view as Dr. Martin Luther King and deliver a speech about freedom. So yeah, it means a lot to me, right? So it's been a great journey, been a great ride. In the midst of that, there is this thing that comes along with being seen sometimes. You get hate, but then you can get a lot of love. And you have to handle both of them properly. And there came a point in time that, a couple of buddies of mine were like, hey, yo, how come you don't have a gun out? You're cool enough to have one. How come you don't have a gun out? I'm like, I have been working behind the scenes for a couple of years on my own platform, just my one-off, like not for the masses, just a one-off for me. My favorite handgun platform is HKDP9, just something I fell in love with the moment I shot it. And I'm like, I've got, 60, 70,000 rounds through this gun, through this platform, that one platform. I'm like, you know what? I know this gun well, and I'm going to make one just a little bit better for me. And the truth be told, I was doing a meme. If you guys want to know how this really kicked off, I was doing a meme, and it was a meme of Pablo Escobar. And it was one of the ones, if you ever seen the memes where he's like standing in the pool looking sad, and it's like sitting on a swing by himself. And I did a meme because I had a couple of buddies, friends of mine, Coleon the War and Ken Scott, that had released their own signature line of firearms. And, I just did a meme and kind of poking fun of them in a lighthearted way, saying, oh, when all your friends have their own custom series guns and you don't. And, it was ha-ha, laugh. I plugged the guns, subscribed to people where to go get them, and just had a good time with it. And then I got an inbox from one of the people that helped me put this project together. And I was like, yep. And the only reason you haven't had that opportunity is because you're sitting on your behind wasting time. You won't get motivated. And I'm all about motivating people. So I kind of take it as a punch in the gut when somebody tells me I ain't motivated, right? So I'm like, all right, okay. But I'll take that because you probably have a point. And I did. I said, okay, well, I already got the rough draft of the designs up. Give me 2 days. Let me finish this thing out, think it through. talked to some mechanical engineers over at HK. So I used my connections there to have a conversation. I'm like, okay, let me have a couple of conversations and I'll get back to you. And we did it. And I got Wayne Hammer, which is the guy that kicked me in the butt. He brought a buddy in who's now a friend of mine, Larry with J&L Machining. These two guys understand the HK platform just as well as I do, or even more. So they were willing to take what I pulled from HK and what they knew and what I wanted. And, we came out with a great design, the great design of the true platform. And what I wanted, though, is I said to self, I'm like, I get popularity is a thing, and right, and you want to, capitalism tells you to capitalize off of it, right? Like, hey, if you have an opportunity to move a product or a market, do it, make money off of that. Now, I have 2 degrees in business, and so my business mind got to like really turn. I'm like, well, you know what? There might be an opportunity there, but my morals kicked in, and my morals are always my saving grace, and they kicked in and like, hey, are you here for mission or are you here for merchandise? And I've always been here for the mission, not for profits, right? I always tell people I will make a ton more money if I stop doing this. This is costing me money. So I was like, well, definitely here for the mission. Well, how can I do the mission and a gun at the same time? Because I'm not doing a gun if it doesn't make sense. I'm not going to force it. It has to make sense for the mission. And went to sleep one night and woke up the next day. It's like, you know what? I'm going to tell our story. I didn't even think about what had been done before. I just said, I'm going to tell our story, the truth about it. Can't tell them all, but I can definitely touch on some that gets everybody else researching and looking and digging into more. And I'm going to tell that story, and I'm going to do it in an unapologetic way, but I want to do it in a way that can be received by everyone. And I want the gun community itself to understand that while we're screaming about freedom, you might be factually correct, but are you missing something in the process? Or are you missing a big part of something in the process? And I just sat back and did a couple more social for a couple of days. God brought it to me. I said, what we're going to do is we're going to defeat the lies of gun control by simply telling the truth. And that's what I to start off telling our story. And so I reached out to Peter that owns a company called Care Custom. He owned phone, and he was just getting his business starting to get noticed. And for roughly 3 hours, getting these concepts down. I was telling the story happened. So he had to do make it about the stories and his brain was just and the individual life. So he came up with the story of a Black Wall Street. I would say well over 80 that never have heard of flat out heard of it, right?
Maybe your signals failing.
Game labeled Black Wall Street, but nobody ever really knew anything about it. And so I decided to tell that story. I want
something going on with your signal.
I couldn't hear you. Hello? We still live?
Your signal is you freezing up.
Fading on the screen.
Oh, something wrong with my signal?
Yeah, you freezing up.
It's on Wi-Fi.
Like the last paragraph.
Yeah, you are choppy, but it's saying I got good connection. Can you hear me? Yeah.
It's still choppy.
It might be the Zoom platform altogether.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because everybody's using it right now.
Don't know
Right.
what to say. Yeah, it's the flag. Yeah, because I'm clear and fluid on my end.
Okay.
Now you're, yeah. So you were choppy. Now you're not choppy anymore.
Okay, so yes, it's probably the platform then, but just I know you were going through that. I know I was talking about the where you at?
Right here. Hello.
Oh, okay. I know you going through the truth. I'm making sure you're gonna go through the history of the two-way community with blacks, right?
Right.
You know, you're going to 1700s and all that type of stuff like you did.
Yep.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yep.
Hopefully this clear up.
All right. Cool. Okay. Am I choppy now? Or can you hear my words streaming straight? Okay. So when I decided to talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, I'm like, okay, that's 1921. This is less than 100 years ago. But I was thinking about, well, what else don't people know? So what will this story allow us to dig into? Well, for a lot of people that don't know, we came over early 1600s, right? Historians will argue even late 1500s, but we don't have to get into the details. Around 1600s we got here, right? Against our will. And we got here, and almost immediately there weren't necessarily laws passed, they were more of rules, but laws, for the lack of better, that were already written to make sure that Black people didn't have arms, no weapon, okay? No guns, no bats, no bricks, no nothing. If you weren't working the land, you didn't have anything that could be used as a weapon. So those rules and laws have always been on the books, even before the country was founded. That's important to understand. Like, these things were established before this was a country. So gun control laws essentially predate the establishment of the United States of America. And when you walk a little bit forward, a lot of individuals, like to celebrate 1776, right? And 1776 is important to understand because that was when America gained its independence from Britain. So between 1600s and 1776, we were always treated the same. Nothing really changed. We didn't get any more rights or anything like that. It was all the same. But as the country became more modernized, so did the law, so did the language, but it was still meant to make sure we weren't armed. And the reason for that is you never wanted, would you want somebody that you've been abusing for generations to get something that can hurt you? Probably not, right? No different than they didn't want us to be able to hurt them with intelligence. That's why we weren't allowed to read and write. No different. It's the same thing. So 1776 happened. So between 1600 and 1776, pretty much the same. 1776 happened. America gained its independence from Britain. And thus you would think there was an opportunity for America to say, okay, we gained freedom as a country. Clearly we want to make all the men here free as well, right? Like, let's just do right. Well, they didn't, right? Because now somebody has to help build the vision they have for the country now going forward. And that was going to be us. So we still need the slave labor. So we looked at 1776, like when America gained its freedom, and you see all the documents and the Constitution and things like that. And when you start going through some of the fine detail, that language of the Constitution was never to include us. And the reason we were never included is because we weren't viewed as human beings. We were viewed as property. If we write a law right now about human rights, we are not going to include our cars, right? So that's essentially what occurred. Well, you get to the ratification of the Second Amendment itself in 1791. It became fully ratified in 1792. So this was an opportunity for the Second Amendment to now encompass all men. And that's where you get the current language from it, and it still didn't happen. And to make that point relevant to this, that was 1792 when it was fully ratified. 1865, all right, because the Constitution doesn't say anything in the Second Amendment about race at all, right? There's no language dealing with color in that. Well, that was a problem to a lot of people. So when we go up to 1865, for an example, the state of Tennessee ratified their state constitution, and I'm paraphrasing at this point, to read, all men have the right to keep and bear arms. And then they changed it to all white men have the right to keep and bear arms. This was something they wanted to make sure that even if on a federal level, if that wasn't clear, that the states weren't going for it, right? You are not about to start arming blacks. That is not going to happen. So they made sure you couldn't own guns there. when you start looking at a lot of what we call the black codes that were going around, right? Black codes were laws that specifically stated that blacks weren't allowed to own guns. So as early as the 1700s and early 1800s, there were, like the French Black Code is one. That rule stated that if you saw any black with anything that could be used as a weapon, and they use a cane as an example in the law, you found any black with anything that can be used as a weapon, you are allowed to kill that individual on sight and leave them where they lay. So any white person could see you with a brick, and maybe you're using this brick because you're gonna go home and, you know, anchor your bed up or something. So you're just walking down the street with a brick, and they could kill you and walk away. Nothing would happen. Free and clear. It was the law, right? So we also, at the same time, we get this evolution of laws that started off as, you know, they started off being called various things, but they eventually got kind of summarized as Jim Crow, right? And Jim Crow started dealing with a lot of different things, not just gun rights. But one thing that Jim Crow did with gun rights is that even Tennessee had to deal with this rule called the Army-Navy law. And Army-Navy law basically stated that blacks weren't allowed to own certain guns. So this is when they started to try to evolve it to where a lot of blacks could only own guns that could be used as hunting and things of that nature, right? And a lot of that was because a lot of the individuals still depended on black labor to go out and do various things for them. Blacks still had to go get the dirt. They still needed you to do that. So yeah, we kind of got to let them have that stuff because we need them to go work for us, right? So you get over into Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, and it kind of brings that to bring us to point. The Army-Navy law, when it arrived in Oklahoma, you weren't allowed to own a handgun if you were black. Now, there was a process that you could go through. Kind of think of it like a really ridiculous concealed carry process, if you will. It was a process you can go through, but it cost an enormous amount of money and a lot of headache, right? So the majority of the populace couldn't afford it. Well, to know anything about Black Wall Street is to know that there were a lot of prosperous black businesses and businessmen and women there, right? So to everybody, money wasn't a problem. Well, in that incident, when there was the first exchange of gunfire, there was a white man that walked up to one of the black men that was standing outside the jail to make sure the young black boy didn't get lynched. And if I need to, I can go over what happened at Black Wall Street. But he looked at him. These black men were carrying long guns over their shoulder. This one man had a handgun tucked into his waist. And a white man walked up to him and said, "Hey, nigger, what are you doing with that gun?" And he pointed at the handgun. Because blacks weren't supposed to have guns that you could conceal. And a struggle ensued over the gun. Nobody knows who shot the first shot, but that's when Black Wall Street started to occur, and they eradicated that community in less than 24 hours because those individuals had inadequate arms based off Jim Crow law. They didn't have enough arms or the right arms to fight back, right? So I like to tell people the limited firearms or somebody telling you you can only have this or that is the illusion of freedom. It is not freedom. It's just the illusion to make you feel good. And Black Wall Street is a prime example of that. So even when you look at some of the conflicts that this country caused as far as guns go, which never completely set us free, you get into some of the political language of it. And what I would like people to understand about the political language, I have a hashtag, I don't do politics, right? And that's because if you really start digging into it, you will notice that politically, a whole lot of stuff that people say today is just stupid. There's no other way around it. Like, oh, hey, you know what? Democrats want to take your guns. And I'm not saying a lot of Democrats don't. That is factually true. That is the truth. But we also have to understand that that's not isolated to one political party. If you go, or the evolution of political parties, if we go back till when the state started to succeed, the state of Mississippi wrote in their secession letter that they are leaving the Union because you want to arm blacks. That was one of the first things they said. So they wanted to leave the Union. So if you to know anything about history is to know that even the Confederate flag you see nowadays, that's another reason why I tell people about being careful about saying what it stands for, because you don't want to look like a fool. You want to be educated. Now, granted, people use it for all kinds of stuff, right? Some of it is definitely racist, and that's undeniable. But the Confederate flag and even the uniforms that the soldiers in the Confederate Army wore, not only were they commissioned by a German was commissioned to design those uniforms. So the Confederate uniforms and the Confederate flag were made by a German American in 1860, and I believe they were ratified. They were commissioned in 1861 to wear those uniforms and fly that flag. The individuals that authorized that were a group of individuals called the Fire Eaters. And the reason why they were nicknamed, there was a group of rich individuals that ran the South. The reason why they were nicknamed the Fire Eaters is because they would rather eat fire than free blacks. That's how hard they were. I would rather eat fire than free blacks. And then there was some financial stuff that the North and South were fighting over too. They had nothing to do with slavery. Just, you know, railroads and all kind of stuff, industry that they were fighting over. But blacks were always at the height of the argument. Well, the Fire Eaters were all rich Southern Democrats. That's who the Fire Eaters were. All rich Southern Democrats, historically factual. So that even that Confederate flag, when people were, you know, use that to say it's a way of hatred, and you have like the Democratic Party now saying, hey, it's a way of hatred. And if you guys are dealing with people that carry guns, that are waving those flags, you know, you understand that you're supporting racism, even against your own. Well, technically, you commissioned that flag. You allowed that to happen. The way that it transpired wasn't that flag was necessarily nowadays. It's used to make sure that people are oppressed and kept down. It's used now as more of a ploy and a toy. So when the Democratic Party tells you you shouldn't be communicating or associating with people that support that flag, understand that goes back to the 1860s, 1861, and that's when Abraham Lincoln became president. So it's a reason why the South was so pissed, right? And they got those things out right away. Well, that was the Democratic Party that allowed for that flag to be flown and allowed for that flag to be used as a symbol of hate. And to understand that the southern states, some of the real far southern states, they didn't even have farmland, right? So in certain states, there wasn't a ton of slavery. They were still jerks. They were still, you know, not nice people, and they still hated blacks, don't get me wrong. But the industry of slavery wasn't as big everywhere because they didn't have the natural agriculture to have it to such a degree. So what they did was, even with the Confederate Army, they started to convince them that, hey, if you don't, and these are the rich people that own the mills and, you know, own property and control law enforcement and the whole 9 yards. If you don't fight in our army with these uniforms and under that flag, we are going to essentially deprive you of everything in your life. You know, I'm going to buy up your farm, I'm going to put your family off of it. Some of us might kill you. Something's going to happen to you. Your life is going to change. So then they forced a lot of those young, not all of them. They forced a lot of those young men to fight up under that flag. And a lot of them would say, I don't even own slaves. I care nothing about this. Well, if you care about your family eating every day, you still better do it. And so the South then also pushed more laws to make sure that any blacks in the South couldn't own guns, because they understood that anybody that had a gun, they wanted it to be a soldier they controlled, right? And so you had a lot of that going on. And that's where you get the conflict even to today, when people are like, well, you know, these Republicans are finding these Confederate flags. I'm not telling you to not feel one way or the other about the flag. You're a free person, do that. But just understand that the same party that's telling us that these are the races is the same party that gave us the flag. And that's the same party that when they commissioned the flag said we're going to enact more strict gun laws on state levels, because remember, they came away from the Union, right? So in all the southern states, we're going to have more strict gun laws because we want to make sure that we catch any black person with a gun down here, we have a right to kill him or arrest him, right? Because only our soldiers should have guns. So that's where a lot of that comes from. Right around the same time that was happening, what a lot of people don't know, and it's pretty cool when you research it, because I was years and years ago, I was really happy to find this out. Right around the same time that was happening, there was a man by the name of Moses Dixon. And Moses Dixon is from Cleveland, Ohio. But at a pretty young age, he moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and he started the Knights of Liberty off of Locust, you know? And he started the Knights of Liberty as a small group of about 5 or 6 men. They grew to 12 men. And then the Knights of Liberty grew to about 47,000 plus illegally armed black men. This was all happening around the same time. And what Moses Dixon was able to do is, you know, look at the situation and say, we're going to enact war on the South because these states are succeeding, right? And they're really clinching down. So the only way we're going to be able to free them is to go down there and free them ourselves, because the Union probably won't have an interest to go help us free them. So we're going to do it, right? And so Moses Dixon basically received guns from Britain. So when America tells us, oh, Britain oppressed us in Britain, and I'm not saying they did, because Britain did that, right? But in every American should, hate the British for what the British did. Well, it was the British that sent us guns. Now, did they have a vested interest in doing that? Sure they did, right? They actually had a bias, but Britain sent us crates and crates and crates of guns and resources. And then there was an establishment between people that could be trusted in the country, where those individuals will give us access to their land, they were given access to their resources, their agriculture, money, hiding places, and all these various things. And these individuals, some of them slave owners, who were just not really in their hearts okay with slavery. They just were born into owning slaves. And many of them shopkeepers, business owners, land owners, things like that. And Moses was one of the architects that constructed all of this as a pathway to go down, as a logistical line, to go down and forcefully fight the South with 47,000 illegally armed black men because they were succeeding, and he treated them like a foreign country, and we have to go fight them. We have to engage in war. The North and the South, through the 1860, 1861, when they commissioned the Confederate flag and all those things, well, that started to pop off. So as any smart man would say, oh, you guys are actually gonna fight? Oh, okay, cool. Well, if you're gonna fight, I'm gonna sit back, make this easy on myself, and then we'll come down and we'll free the slaves after the South is weakened, because either way, win, lose, or draw, you're going to be weaker after you engage in this war. And what happened is we decided to start sneaking slaves out in the midst of battles. And that's how you got the Underground Railroad. That's where that comes from. The Underground Railroad was not a system that was meant to just sneak. It eventually evolved into a system of sneaking people out because it was already the logistics were there, but it was meant originally as a path to fight war against the South with almost an army of 50,000 black men to go down and forcefully free slaves. Their plan was to take over sections of states at a time and arm the slaves as they pushed through, so their numbers could continuously grow and continuously grow and continuously grow. So by the time they got down to like Florida, they would probably have 125,000 soldiers, in battle ready to go. And Britain was obviously going to have a vested interest. If Britain was fully prepared to also, if you made headway, to send over soldiers to back these soldiers up, right? And clearly the Union might have had an interest in sending some soldiers down as well. So that was the original plan, but it didn't have to go that far. So that's when they had to go out and hire individuals that knew the lands, had intimate knowledge of the lands, work with them, get them educated, get them resources and help them out. They called them conductors, i.e. Harriet Tubman. So Harriet Tubman was one of the great conductors, obviously an iconic woman that will live in our hearts forever. She's one of the most iconic figures of that, but who also helped design that infrastructure and or keep it going was Frederick Douglass. A lot of individuals don't give him credit for that, but he was absolutely involved in that chain of process, and plenty of other white and black leaders alike that made sure that people could hide and things like that. So what wound up happening is that got more popular. I'm sorry, not popular, but more successful. If you ever seen the movie Harriet, they started telling like how many slaves she started to free and things of that nature. Well, she wasn't the only one. Well, she was just the most iconic and the most successful, but not alone. Well, what happened is they knew that we have to put, a plug in this. We have to stop this. All right. But the problem is now we're going after people that we don't know what they have. We don't know if they got guns or not. Right. We got laws, but if they're running from us, we don't know if they have guns. So they got a little cocky and they started sending out what we know to be bounty hunters or slave catchers. Right. That's when you kind of really see them develop and become more bold and brazen, because now the property owners were like, they keep running. I don't care how you bring them back. Just bring them back in pieces, in a body bag, limping. I don't care, because now it's personal. Now I got my pride involved. Give me my property back. Well, the same men that were prepared to embark on war also became the resistance to the bounty hunters and the slave catchers. So as they went out chasing slaves, they ran into a militia that they weren't fully aware of. And that's how we were able to keep a lot of people free from the slave catchers and from hounds and things like that. It's because we actually had a standing army that was willing to fight them. So the slaves come running by, and if you keep chasing them, then we have an army to fight you. And so from that, you got, and you can see this in like the movie 12 Years a Slave. We got the reverse Underground Railroad. So they start allowing people to get comfortable and settled up north. And then the slave catchers will blend into the average community and just be regular people hanging out, and they would kidnap people and bring them back, right? And they got paid a handsome reward for that. That's why you got the reverse Underground Railroad, because you would run into fighters when you chase the slaves head on. So a lot of slave owners said, you know what, we have to do this more the strategic way, and we have to sneak them back. The problem was when people got up north, they normally settled down with guns, right? Because even though they were illegally armed, they settled down with guns. And the Knights of Liberty was also arming people with the guns from Britain and other guns from other resources to make sure that they can maintain freedom. So a lot of those men, as they freed them, they actually trained them, gave them basic firearms training and say, hey, this is what this thing is. This is how you use it. Here's your roadmap to where you're going. Go get settled and we'll follow it with you, right? So guns have always been a part of our story with freedom. Always been a part of that story. But the sad part is now they politicized it to where it's like, oh, you know, this political party it hates you, they're racist and you shouldn't trust them. And then this political party is like, well, no, I just want you to be safe, and they ignore our history. The truth of the matter is neither one of them gave a damn about us. Neither one of them. And they still don't to this day, if you ask my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. But that's how our evolution with guns happened. And so when you look at different things that occurred throughout that process, as people started to become free, the Union, the North, if you will, who pretended to be our friend and pretended to say, yeah, you're going to be safe up here. Everything's good. Everybody praises Abraham Lincoln for saying he did so much for the slaves. Did he do some things? Sure. But he gets more credit than I think he should get. We get settled up north and everybody thinks it's cool. We are illegally armed, but we expect for the North laws to change because the North is saying that you can be free up here. Now you have to remember, the North was coming a little bit more industrialized, not so much agriculture, but really industrialized, right? They needed labor. They needed labor. So it's like, if we're going to have this pop off, yeah, we need these strong ox-built Black people to come up here and help us get this industry going. And so they lured us in. And one thing that happened after that is they passed the Federal Fugitive Act. The North, that claimed to be our friends, actually didn't block a federal law that allowed anybody from the South to come get their slave. Anybody. It was a Federal Fugitive Act. You were considered a fugitive from the South, and they can come north and get you. You were no longer protected. And so a lot of individuals, unfortunately, didn't have adequate training with their guns. They just had the little bit that they had got, and they couldn't fight it. They couldn't continue. And a lot of them got caught. A lot of them got returned. Many of them were shot and killed because they were found with guns. And those various stories are marked throughout history here and there. You can see little blocks of it. Well, what Harriet did as a response to that is Harriet didn't go through the states like Pennsylvania and all that and ask that states for individual understanding of what's going on, because she was actually a victim of that. They almost got her back throughout the Fugitive Slave Act. They almost caught her based off that. And so what Harriet did is Harriet went and became a leader of a battalion of Black men in the Union Army. That battalion of Black men, if you ever see the movie, you can kind of see them at the very end. They come at the very, very end of that movie. Well, that battalion of Black men were a division of the Knights of Liberty. They were already trained soldiers. The Knights of Liberty, when they were no longer needed, so to speak, they broke off about 25,000 of them went to get paid by the Union Army. And so they went into a salary from the Union Army. They were already trained soldiers, right? So if you want us to fight for you and you want us to fight in this war, give my money, all right? Give my money and we'll fight in that war. Harriet was actually leading that first battalion of soldiers, and that's who you see fighting some of the slave catchers and even some of the Confederate Army back as the slaves are running out to freedom to the boats. And so once again, guns became involved again, but Harriet had to be smart enough to say, we have to do this at a war level because that's going to be the only chance that they give us to continue to have guns, because even the North didn't want us armed and the North was willing to give us back. So from there, that's when it was important for Blacks to go into the military, because that's where they could get their training and you didn't have to hide it. You didn't have to be sneaky about it. And so as history progressed, more and more of the men that went off into the lands as the expansion out west came and we started going further north and further south and things started to become more spread out. That's how a lot of the knowledge of guns was transferred, because so many of us had served in the armed forces, because that was the only place where it was safe to get the knowledge. But then we still had to sneak guns because states started enforcing Jim Crow laws and stuff like that to keep us enslaved. So when you walk through a lot of that history, it shows that it's always been about making sure we were down and out and with our arms, because everybody universally understood whenever they get guns, they're going to be free. And we know that they're soldiers and they're fighters because when we armed them with guns, look at what happened, right? So it was always a risk for us to have guns. When you fast forward through the 1800, 1865, 1870 and things like that, as people are spreading out, there's still fighting going on. Blacks are starting to really disperse around the country. People start settling. One of those settlements was Greenwood, Oklahoma, or Tulsa, a suburb of Tulsa, was one of the settlements, and one of many around the country. And people got settled there, and they built their own community, self-sustaining, self-sufficient, once again, because of Jim Crow laws restricted to the kind of guns they can own. So I explained that conflict a little bit earlier on. So then Tulsa happened, but that was in 1921. And most people go back to that incident and say, that was real unfortunate. I can't believe that was less than 100 years ago. Well, earlier than that was 1917, right? 1917 happened less than 30 minutes from where most of us are sitting at right now. And that was over in East St. Louis. East St. Louis still, to this day, sits in the state of Illinois, right? Illinois gun laws are like, what? All right? So they've always made sure, it started with blacks. Illinois just never gave it up for everybody else, because originally it was like, look, it's a gun law, but it's really for them black dudes. Carry your gun, man, you'll be okay. You know what I mean? But no, in 1917, there was basically a labor dispute. Long story short, there was after the labor dispute, blacks were being used as scabs in the workforce. The white workers didn't like that. They started harassing black neighborhoods, shooting in houses, beating up people here and there. And one of them had a car that matched the car of a police officer. This police officer was on duty one night and just riding around the neighborhood, and his car got shot up, and he was killed. Now, that particular cop on that particular day was doing nothing wrong. It was a bad shoot. It was a case of mistaken identity, all right? But the community had been tired of all the other stuff that was happening. They saw that car and they took action. And so the mob used that as an opportunity to say, see, they got illegal guns, they're killing police, let's attack them. So broad daylight, they drove people off rail cars, burned them, shot them, clubbed them, all right there in East St. Louis, right across the East Bridge, right? That was roughly 250 individuals were killed that day because of that. When the survivors of that, who didn't have firearms, who had no way of protecting themselves because of Illinois laws, when they tried to come over the East Bridge to Missouri, our governor at the time had told our law enforcement not to allow the refugees to cross over into Missouri. So those refugees also couldn't go back and fight because they weren't allowed to own guns. But they had to turn around. Eventually, the National Guard was released. The National Guard escorted people to safety, but a lot of individuals made rafts off of the debris that was at the riverbank, and they floated across and they established a community known as Kinloch. Kinloch eventually grew out and grew to be what it was, and you got a lot of people that left Kinloch. They went to Ferguson, Florissant, St. Louis, things of that nature. But a lot of those refugees floated over here and established that community called Kinloch, and that's where they came from. But once over in Missouri, still the same problem, right? They still really couldn't own firearms, a little bit more liberal over here as far as the ownership of them, but not totally free. But they were slaughtered because they couldn't defend themselves, right? So that's even how we got Kinloch established. And so to understand all those different stories and even how it builds up to modern day, when you see people like take Governor Northam out of Virginia, when you see individuals like that saying things like, yeah, we're gonna take guns and you're not gonna be able to own this type of gun or that type of gun. And I always remind people, well, that kind of mentality, the gun control itself and what you can own all started with us. You go back to, most of us know them as Saturday night specials, right? Jimenez, little guns like that, cheap guns you can buy. You know them as Saturday night specials. The reason why those guns were called Saturday night specials is because they were easy to afford. And it was kind of a running joke that you always know that blacks at the number houses and stuff like that, they're gonna be doing something crazy on Saturday night, so they like to put these little guns on them, and they got the little nickname Saturday Night Special. But what most people don't know is those guns in a lot of states you couldn't own. So they actually priced guns So if a gun, let's just say at the time, let's say a nice gun, the Glock of the day, right? Let's say the Glock of the day costs $100. Let's say the Jimenez of the day, which was a Saturday night special that we could afford because of our income levels, let's say it was $25. Okay, just for argument's sake. It was illegal to own any gun cheaper than $75. You couldn't own it. And that was a way of controlling us to make sure that we did it by what cost. So we're going to make all these cheaper guns illegal, and we're literally going to allow guns based off price point. That's the only way you can buy them. The only way you can get them, right? And so blacks were the victims of Saturday night specials for those reasons, because of our income levels. We couldn't afford it. There were also gun in many states, just like you had to vote. In order for you to get permission to carry a gun, you had to pass aptitude tests. You had to prove you could read and write, not shoot. You had to prove you could read and write to a certain level that they established was acceptable, right? So even as the law started to kind of break, they still put things in a place where you weren't allowed to, you couldn't pass. It was highly improbable that you would. And so when you look at people like Governor Northam to this day, that's passing gun control laws and trying to say what kind of guns you can own and things like that, we should pay attention to that. When you get up to walk with me into the 1900s, right around 1960 something, the date slipped me. I want to say 65, was it 64? But when we finally did take advantage of the fact that America started kind of just needed everybody to chill out, they started becoming more relaxed. Blacks were able to start owning guns on a more kind of acceptable level, if you will. As soon as one of our militias truly embraced the Second Amendment, like our first modern day militia that embraced what modern day freedom is with a gun, right? They didn't have to fight against slavery. They weren't trying to be soldiers that were going to war with the South. That was the Black Panthers, right? And so when you look at the Black Panthers, when it came to guns and gun ownership, they embraced it fully embraced it, right? And Ronald Reagan was the president of California at the time. And Bobby Seale led a march on the state capitol when Ronald Reagan just so happened to have some middle schoolers at the state capitol. And Ronald Reagan didn't appreciate that these Black people walked upon state grounds with their guns. Nobody was shot. They didn't flourish the guns at anybody. They were open carry. They were exercising their constitutional right. And Bobby Seale went in there and they conducted their protest. Well, Reagan decided he didn't like that. He looked over at this gentleman named Mulford, M-U-L-F-O-R-D, and told Mulford that he needs to write a gun control act against them. What's important to understand about that, it wasn't just writing the law, because the law couldn't necessarily say the Black Panthers can't own guns. You can't say that nowadays. It's no longer openly acceptable just to say that, right? So what did they have to do? They started on a campaign to demonize and make the Black Panthers out to be a terrorist organization. So that's when they started using mainstream media, at its version of it at the time, the newspapers really, to say, these people are bad, they're threatening our police officers with guns. They got that because, the Black Panthers were known for watching traffic stops. They were known for being there and observing the police when they interacted with the community. So they started to say that was to intimidate our police officers, and they just labeled them as a terrorist organization. They did. And they tore them apart every which way they could. So when they wrote the law, if you were deemed a terrorist organization, can you own guns? Nope. You also couldn't open carry guns anymore. So your little terrorist organization can't open carry and walk up on my state capitol grounds again, right? And so when Reagan ascended to be president, nobody in California really realized the ramifications of what just happened to them, because they were so busy caring about the terrorist organization being disarmed, these Black thugs that are running around here hurting everybody. They didn't realize that they couldn't say just the Black people anymore in the 1900s, not the late 1900s. It included everybody. And America became to love Ronald Reagan. Californians, gun owners, not necessarily. And that's when Ronald Reagan started to say things like, hey, basically, I believe in sensible gun control. You should only own certain kind of guns. You should only be able to do this, be able to do that. And so Reagan, although praised by one part of America, saying he was one of the greatest presidents ever, even by a lot of gun owners, they like to, choose to forget it, that Ronald Reagan started his gun control off with Black people, the Black Panthers, And then he basically had to keep biting the bullet and just say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I do believe in gun control because guess what? It calmed them black folks down. So that's how I feel, right? Ronald Reagan, suspectedly, nobody can prove this, so this is speculation, also wanted his ruling in California, the Mulford Act, he wanted that to have the same kind of consequence to all other black organizations across the country, right? Because we can do it in California, we can do it everywhere else too. It'd be another way to disarm the blacks. Now that's part of speculation. We haven't been able to prove that in the history books. So when you get past that, you know, a lot of Black Americans then started to see that their local organizations and groups didn't necessarily have big laws written against them, but they kind of use that as a platform to say, if you're organizing, if Zulu existed in 1969 as it is now, Missouri, the local county sheriff will be looking at this organization as a potential terrorist organization because they knew there was precedent to disarm you based off what happened in California, right? So those are the things that started to occur. And when we walk forward through history, we got gun control in 1985, I think it passed in 86, we got the Hughes Amendment. And that disallowed anybody to own fully automatic machine guns, or they had to be grandfathered in. Now what happened between those two time frames is that we had gun organizations that already existed, but were getting bigger. One of them being the NRA. And the NRA did back the Mulford Act. That is a fact. That is not a secret. So even though that organization to this day, you know, has called themselves trying to do a lot for the Black community, I clearly having a Black spokesman. I've been on the platform several times, you know, and things like that. Historically, they were still responsible. Not the same people. Obviously, people die, and it's not the same folks there. But they were still, as an organization, responsible for assisting with the Mulford Act. And then they also supported the Hughes Amendment. So when that happened, a lot of people went back and started attacking the NRA based off what they did to the Black Panthers, but only when they took all the white people machine guns away. So then they started to say, well, no, you guys have been supporting gun control because look what you did in California, you passed gun control. And that's when you start to see the emergence of individuals using the Black struggle with gun control. And that's when you start seeing mainstream white America say, no, look, they use gun control against Black people and they're doing it to us, and gun control is racist. That's where that big explosion of that came from. And then when you fast forward to more modern times in 1994, which is why I tell people that, in my personal opinion, to be a supporter of Hillary Clinton is like a spit in the face of every Black person on earth. In 1994, we got the crime bill. Now, two different parts of America paid attention to that crime bill for two different reasons. One part of America paid attention to it because of us. We had everything happen with Contra and Reagan and, you know, Ollie North, who was very interesting when the NRA decided to make him the president. That was a whole conflict in a lot of people's hearts, right? One part, you are trying to do things that with gun rights. And then the other part, me understanding my history and my community, you're actually putting this dude in position that was part of the Contras coming out of Nicaragua, which moved cocaine to California, and they were allowed to by the CIA, and then flooded our communities with it and gave us crack. And then you changed the federal the statutes to read differently from cocaine to crack, thus allowing the 1994 crime bill to come into play. Reagan, basically, if you think about it like basketball, Reagan threw the Clintons an alley-oop, set it up that way. And, you know, even Ollie North was part of that. So when we get the 1994 crime bill, one of the things that they rolled into the crime bill was the 10-year assault weapons ban. So that's why you had two different parts of America paying attention to it. Well, what people don't realize about that is nowadays you still have people telling you, and I'm pretty sure you guys have seen it, you have people telling you that you shouldn't vote for the Democratic Party because of what they did in the 1994 crime bill, right? And they don't talk about the gun part. They are talking about, you know, the 3 strikes and you're out. They are talking about the fact that, you know, you're going to get harsher sentences. The fact that you got law enforcement dumped into your communities with impunity. You know, law enforcement back in the 90s, yeah, you think it's bad now? It was real bad then because they were actually given the written authority to do that. You had a lot of interagency cooperations. Funding through that crime bill was flooded into law enforcement communities, flooded into them, right? So not only do you have the resources, the interagency cooperation, you also have the permission to do what you want to do, and we have the prison system to back up what you do. And we understand because of the poverty in the communities, the ghettos that have been structured, they don't have the legal ability to fight back, right? And even when they figure out how to fight back, we're gonna have the law so mumbled and jumbled, by the time they figure it out, it'll be too late. You already did your 10 years, now you can go home, right? So, but what most people don't realize that about that, when they say from that 1994 crime bill that the Democrats were horrible, and look at what the Republicans would have never allowed that to happen. So you need to vote for Republicans to make sure that you can keep your gun rights. Because look, the Democrats want to put you in prison as a black man, but the Republicans didn't have anything to do with that. And they would have never signed off on that. The Republican president would have never did that. Well, not only did Reagan start that court, he started that full court press. And not only did he ultimately throw the Clintons an alley-oop, if you look at that time span between the 80s and the 90s, if you look at that time in history, recent history, and you pay attention to it, well, everybody that ran for any political office ran on a platform of law and order. They all talked about how they could get things under control. Guess who was supposed to be out of control? Us, right? That's because that's when crack was tearing our communities apart. So it was all in dismay, right? So they all ran on that. So the Clintons did too, right? So they grabbed the alley-oop, they promised to get things together, but what a lot of people are remiss about is that 49 Republicans voted in favor of the 1994 crime bill. What they basically bartered was the Democratic Party wanted to give us 2/3, they wanted to give us a lot of funding. The Republican Party said to the women, because they clearly knew that the women were going to be along to raise these kids, right? So they said, hey, we will give you the gun ban, but you have to give us back 2/3 of the funding that you were going to flood into those black communities to help. Democratic Party is like, well, we needed that money because we about to take all the fathers and the dads and the uncles out of there. We got to be able to flood them with a little money so they can survive. If you want these guns, you need to give us 2/3 of that money. We don't want to give up 2/3 of the money because we look at it as welfare, right? But we will give you the assault weapons ban if you give us the money. So they agreed on that, and you have 49 Republicans that actually voted in favor of the 1994 crime bill. You go about 2.5, 3 months back on my Instagram page, I listed them all by name and the states they represented, right? So when people are convincing us now that one party or the other has our best interest at heart, that is absolutely not true. And that's where we have to become rational thinkers. We have to remove any bias. Because even at that time, the Republicans would have allowed Americans to keep their guns if the Democrats didn't agree to give them some money instead of the money coming to our communities when our dads and brothers and everybody else was going to prison, right? So they actually used guns in that situation as a bartering chip to make sure that we could be further oppressed and not have the resources to recuperate, right? So they use guns in that sense as well. And now fast forward to modern times, the fight now is to make sure that we need to do everything that we can to make sure we're fighting against gun control laws. And that is obvious. I don't matter what political party somebody votes for, but I will tell you honestly, the one thing that we are missing the most of, and a lot of people don't pay attention to when it comes to us maintaining our freedoms now, collectively, we all have to do a better job of making sure we can keep these young men in a position where they can even legally own a gun. And that's where we're losing out on a lot. We don't have more gun owners. We can't have them, right? Because they're prohibited persons, right? So we can't say we're going to fix this legally for you and keep battling because now I can't arm you, right? And as long as they can still trick these young boys into catching charges, or these young boys don't have any guidance and on their own they're all going out doing something foolish, now we're in a position to where if you think about it like battle, we can't even arm our soldiers. We can give them information, we can give them education, but we can't give them arms, right? Because you, in proxy, giving them arms makes you a felon, right? So now they get 2 for 1, and we just keep going down the list. So you can't give them arms. And that's where we have to start being a little bit more methodical with our approach. And that's why I like using programs like Aiming for the Truth, right? To make sure that we're avoiding that so we actually can arm our young men. When you look at the recent incident that happened with Ahmaud Arbery, might that have played out differently if he could have legally owned a gun and he didn't have his criminal past? Potentially, right? I don't know. I wouldn't know what his level of training was. A lot of variables there. But would he have had a better fighting chance against 2 dudes hopping out of a pickup truck with a 12 gauge? Probably, right? So we, as we walk into modern times with that, we have to be aware of not only how to use this political system in our favor, but don't allow people to catch you up, man, and only supporting one party or the other. You know, treat yourself like a free agent when it comes to the overall protection of your people. And like, I'm gonna go wherever the best way for me to go to strategically make sure that me and mine are okay, right? not only from your immediate family, but for your community at large across the country. But they will try to trap you in with that. But when you walk through the history, and I know I had to kind of hop to make stuff make sense, but when you walk through the history of what this gun thing is now, the tricky part is not fighting for the right to own guns, because America is paying such close attention to that. We need to be part of the fight, right? That's cool. But the game is so cold that now, even with the laws that they're passing that have nothing to do with guns, they know by getting you with that, they're going to prevent you from even owning one. So it's not even a question of who can be armed, as long as I can keep. And what I like to explain to people is this: everybody knows about the 1994 crime bill. I remember sitting in high school when Hillary's on TV and called me a super predator. I was kind of offended, right? I remember that. Now, here's the thing about that though. When did somebody ever write an anti-1994 crime bill? Those laws didn't go away. They might have mutated, but they didn't go away. So we're still getting caught up with other things. They're smart enough to know America is waking up and they're fighting, they're becoming more involved. We got phones now and social media. We can convey information real quick. We can do rallies. Virginia had a rally of 50,000 people in less than 3 weeks. Like, they can rally and pay attention and talk to each other. So their freedom is more known. They're figuring out how to share it. But what we can do is, with dope charges, fatherless households, catch them in on a crime. And once they've committed a crime, well, guess what? Not only do we keep them from getting employment, keep them from getting, homes and businesses. All right, every now and then one of them become a rapper or a basketball player and make it out. But we still got 98% of them, right? So we can trap them that way. And when it comes to firearms, because I caught you on this BS charge over here, as soon as you touch a gun, 7 years. All right, and then I'm gonna lock you up, make money off of you that way. And so we have to make sure that we are saving our young men from the other end, because we're not gonna be able to arm them if all we keep focusing on is the gun. Because now we got all the guns, and who we giving them to? Who we giving them to? They have nobody to share them with, because so many of our young men are prohibited persons. Another thing I would like for all of us to do a lot better job of, myself included. I am going to release some content covering these subjects. I'm trying to figure out the best way to release it. But our young women are playing a very, in a negative way, they're playing an instrumental part in hurting our gun rights as well. And what's happening is our young men, minus education, or using the education they do have in the wrong way, are convincing a whole lot of our young women to do straw purchases for them. A lot of them. A lot of them. If you're in the St. Louis area, where most of you are, you see the piazzas just recently got shut down. Well, that was one of the reasons why. They were allowing a lot of straw purchases to go on. All right. Working a range counter myself for years, and I've known, seen it. I can see it coming. A lot of these young girls are walking in. We got a lot of these young brothers that's convincing these girls to buy these guns for them. And what they're doing is they're catching charges as well. All right. So we're destroying, families at one time. And a lot of us, myself included, aren't doing enough to educate even our young women about, hey, just like I can't give them a gun, you can't give them a gun. What we need to try to do is try to help them from before he can own a gun. But we are allowing our young girls to be used as mules, essentially, to allow these young boys to still get guns. So we have to do a better job of educating them as well. So, because what's going to happen if we keep allowing, if they get enough people that they keep getting pressed on straw purchases, even though the prosecution rate for a straw purchase is pretty low, if that starts to happen enough, just like it did with Piazza and they shut them down, every gun shop we go to is going to get that headache and they're going to shut them down. That's what's going to happen. And then we're going to have a lack of places to go shop. We're already limited. If you look in any major city in America, most of them don't have gun stores. St. Louis City does not have a gun store. The last one was Bullseye. You have nowhere in the city limit to go shoot. Right? So where are our educational centers? Right? And so one last thing, and I'll shut up and let you guys ask any questions. One last thing I need for us to look at, if you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, the biggest insult to our community right now with guns is one that doesn't go talked about a lot. We are always used as a measuring stick for gun crimes, always. They like to code it as black on black crime, which I think is an insult. I don't like that term at all. I never heard nobody say about white on white, Asian on Asian. The Yakuza's been a mafia in California for I don't know how damn long, and I never heard nobody say nothing about no Asian. I don't even hear people say Mexican on Mexican. I don't even hear that, right? But somehow black on black is a thing, right? But it's just crime. But our communities do have our own level of crime that I think is unacceptable, right? And I don't think anybody will argue that. The problem is every time in history that we've had a problem as a country or any country, you educate people around that problem, right? So if you're going to go from agricultural to industrial, trade schools show up, right? If you're going to go from industrial to more service orientated, college courses show up. We've always educated people when there was a problem to fix said problem, right? AIDS is here, use condoms. Like it's always a solution in education to the problem. Well, riddle me this. If guns are such a big problem in the inner cities, then why don't we have educational facilities to transfer information in a proper way to solve the problem? Why aren't we placing representatives from said community in those educational facilities to solve the problem, or to at least dissect it to figure out how to get to the conclusion and solve the problem? Well, that's because they don't want it fixed. They don't want it fixed. They actually need the violence to keep the promise that they'll get it solved one day. They don't want, excuse me, they don't want us armed and educated. So that's why a lot of cities aren't allowing for gun stores to operate. St. Louis City, for example, Lacey Clay. I think that brother is one of the biggest insults to our faces. Lacey Clay stood on stage with Lyda Crewson and promoted gun control. And he promoted it with a woman that is not from our areas, doesn't understand, but both of them are using our areas as an example of why we need gun control. But I can tell you now, I have personally reached out to him. I have personally reached out to Better Family Life. I have personally reached out to the Urban League. I have been reached out to a lot of them, and I have been told or ignored by all these different organizations that will stand up on stage with a white woman talking about how they need to fix our community by disarming us. But none of them want to enter in the proper public discussion and education about how to fix it. St. Louis City is also the same city, and the only reason I won't release the email is because I want people to feel free to contact me and respond to me. I don't want people to think I'm gonna blast them out, but I will talk about it. I presented an opportunity to the city of St. Louis, all right? And it goes into my point that they want to deny people the education. I presented an opportunity to the city of St. Louis to use my contacts in the gun industry through big organizations and small organizations, and some of the most popular instructors around the country and some unknown instructors around the country. Open up all the rec centers. We will do no political nothings, no shirts that say nothing about pro-gun, anti-gun, none of that, no marches. I will provide all of the material, every inch of it, to teach every single willing family in this city. Criminal history doesn't matter because we're not going to be using real guns. Doesn't matter, right? To teach them about firearm safety. Open up all the rec centers. I'll bring the staff. I'll bring the material. And we'll open it up for the weekend to everybody in the city that wants to just come get hot stove. If I own this thing, how do I keep it safe in my house? What's the safe direction? Real basic stuff. Just how to be safe in the house with it, so we can stop having so many children finding guns and killing themselves or their siblings, right? And also teaching parents how to be responsible and keeping guns from being stolen. Or give a parent that owns a gun that lacks the education and information a little bit about how they can be safer. We ain't gonna be shooting that day. We're just having conversations and open dialogue. My response that I got from one of the representatives of Park and Recreations that would have to open a facility said, we are uninterested in participating in something of that nature. But then this is the same city and our city representatives, many that look like us, that say they want the violence to stop. But I'm here to tell you guys firsthand, one of the things that I have the privilege of doing is being in a lot of rooms and having a lot of conversations, and many of them I cannot repeat. They are anything but interested in having that conversation. Nobody in St. Louis in particular, which is just a representation of what else should be happening around the country, or it has the opportunity to happen, but nobody in this city, all these so-called leaders, nobody in this city has been willing to open up and have that kind of dialogue. None of them. Demetrius Johnson, and I'm not saying I'm tired of hiding behind not calling people out by names. Demetrius Johnson, 104.1, 95.5, all the DJs, all of them, none of them But they'll be the same people, like the radio station, that will play the newest cut that's talking about murdering black men. That's talking about tearing apart the black family. But none of them want to have an open discussion. What they will do is have a march about taking guns. But none of them want to have an open discussion about being proactive and saving lives. And that's something we need to do collectively to put that pressure on them. Because you will talk about taking guns from black men and black women, but you won't talk about educating them, but you'll be the same organizations and people that tell us we can't trust the police, what the government has done to us, right? But convincing us to be unarmed. Well, that makes no sense to me. We all understand police ain't gonna do shit for you. We get that. And not because they don't want to, but how you gonna be everywhere at every time protecting people? You can't do it, right? But if you're telling me I can't depend on the police and you're telling me that we know the government ain't gonna protect me, why are you then trying to convince me to be disarmed? But we allow that to happen because they'll come out and say something about Ahmaud Arbery or Trayvon Martin, and they'll use something that we're all sensitive about to wash that ignorance away, or they can just go with, well, yeah, that's unfair, and we need to make sure we're holding people accountable. Well, why don't you help me hold them accountable right then and there when they do it? Then we can be talking about this in court. And I don't have to be trying to give some representation from the grave. And I don't have you passing laws that are disarming and causing my young men to be felons, right? So we are allowing all our city leaders to be hypocrites. Every last single one of them. There should be no reason that I'm just a messenger, a conveyor of a message. That's all I am. But why is it and how is it that Time Magazine can come here and have a conversation with me, but a local alderperson won't? How is that? I've stood in the rooms with some of you're probably, I'm pretty sure some of you know people in law enforcement. I've stood in the room with some of those captains that hate me. And the only reason they hate me is because they understand I know the law. And then B, they understand there's nothing that they can do to me to shut me up. I don't work for the department no more, so there's no consequence there, right? But when I stand up, I'm talking against the BS that they're spilling out. All these city leaders, from our police leaders to our political leaders, are convincing us that we should only take the guns away from each other. But at the same breath, they're convincing us that we're victims of the system, and they or somebody, they'll figure out will keep us safe. So if we actually want to fix this, a good start would be getting to our young men and putting pressure on our political leaders. Stop letting them invite you to places, just using you as a face. Call them out. Yo, you said you was gonna do this. Why ain't you done this? That's why I don't invite any of them to help out for Aiming for the Truth. And some of them have actually refused to assist with my community work just because they found out I was pro-gun. That's how deep they want to make sure that we're unarmed. Nobody on this platform is appreciated by them. Nobody. But these are the same people that convince us they're all about black pride and black power. And when you walk through our history, it is insulting as hell to have somebody nowadays that look like you, that supports somebody that doesn't look like you, that says that you don't have the right to own a gun. And many of them believe because you're not responsible enough. As some of our black leaders supported Mike Bloomberg, who is famously secretly recording and saying the only way to save black men between 18 and 25 is to make sure they don't have guns because they're incapable of handling them. This is what we're doing. We're supporting somebody that believes that your Fourth Amendment rights meant nothing to do stop and frisk. Did you know that a lot of your local aldermen here in St. Louis also support stop and frisk? I don't know if you guys are aware, but we have stop and frisk in Missouri to this day. It is called street demonstration. And we did street sweeps, where if you were standing outside on any piece of land that might be considered public, and a lot of them even went on private property, and you were seen between certain times, a police officer can pull up, search you, and detain you, and summons you just because you are standing outside. It is called street demonstration. It's the same damn thing as stop and frisk, right? And while they're searching these young men, they're finding enough on them to charge them with in many cases. Guess what? Now this dude would never be a gun owner because he wanted to smoke a couple of blunts, you know, whatever the case may be, right? So now he won't be able to be a legal gun owner, right? Think about how many of our city cops have taken guns from people illegally. Now, I've had to write 3 or 4 letters to the St. Louis City Police Department about returning somebody's firearm to them because they were a legal gun owner, right? But to them, guns are bad. St. Louis City to this day, when everybody was all happy about the open, our constitutional carry that came into law, what was that, 2017? That came into law. Everybody was really happy about that. Did you know the St. Louis City still has an ordinance on the books that minus a concealed carry permit, you cannot carry a gun in the St. Louis City limits? Amazing, ain't it? But this is the same city leaders that are convincing you about your progress and your pride. And the only reason more people haven't been charged with that ordinance is because a lot of them don't know. And so when people are also trying to convince you, and hear me, that our people especially, right? I say it all the time. If you want to hide something from black people, where do you put it? Everybody know you put it in the book, right? So that's what the laws are. It's laws. It's a book of laws, right? So it's a set of reading. Well, when we got constitutional carry in this state, this is something else people need to think about. We got, the same day we got our version, because it's really not constitutional carry, but our version of constitutional carry, we also had 3 other options to get a concealed carry permit. So tell me this, if I don't need a concealed carry permit anymore, why the same day you tell me that, you give me 3 additional ways to get it? So I can get a 5-year, I think it's a 10-year, a 15-year, and a 25-year, if I'm not mistaken. But why? Why is that even an option if I don't need this anymore? That's because what Missouri did in general was state, hey, you know what? Back in 2002, 2003, when we got concealed carry, we left it, if you have our concealed carry with open carry, because Missouri's been an open carry state for a long time, but with or without a permit, open carry is going to be left up to the discretion of each individual county if they want you to open carry, even with a concealed carry permit. What wound up happening is, and St. Anna and Bridgeton are a great example. Bridgeton has always locally had great gun laws, by the way, always. You could open carry a gun in Bridgeton back into like the 1980s. They've always had great open carry laws. However, St. Anne, not so much so. And so in modern history, you would be open carrying in Bridgeton and cross over that individual line into St. Anne, kind of where, like, if you're on St. Charles Rock Road where that Shell gas station and that Dairy Queen are, and if you cross over that little individual line, you get into some trouble, right? And so what the state ultimately said was, guess what? We got too many good people getting in trouble. If you have our concealed carry permit, the laws are the same for you, no matter where you're at in our state. City ordinance be damned. The laws are the same. And then we get to 2017, and they say we're opening up to be a constitutional carry state. When all of our people got real excited about that, yeah, man, I ain't got to go to no training. I ain't got to have no training. It's cool. I'm going to get my thumper, and I'm going to be out there in the streets. I'm good, man. Bump y'all training. I ain't doing all that. All right, cool. But here's the thing. Those laws that concealed carry permit covered you from, minus it, you were subject to each individual gun law in each individual county in the state. So if that county has some ridiculous rule on the books, you're going to be subject to it. If you go into a place with a concealed carry permit that you're not supposed to go into it with and you honestly forgot, there's a great chance you'll get one of these the first time, right? Like, you know, I mean a prohibited location, right? You'll get that slap on the hand. By law, minus that concealed carry permit, it's at minimum a misdemeanor. Same person with or without the permit. But what they flooded down to our communities is the fact that, oh, you don't need a permit anymore. Well, here's the crazy part. Okay, don't have that permit. So you're going to be minus the education you get from a class anyway. Let's just start there. You ain't going to know self-defense laws. You ain't going to know none of that, right? So that sets you up for failure right there. Then 2, by them convincing you that you don't need the concealed carry permit, you're going to be minus the education and you're going to be minus the protection. So when you walk your butt somewhere and do something, oh, you know what? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. We were smart enough to put that shit in the book because we knew you black folks wouldn't read it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you this little charge. Even if I don't put you in jail for a long time, the charge is what's important because now you can't carry that gun. Now you can't go get a concealed carry permit, and I'm gonna make you a felon. All right, so thanks for not sitting your butt down for 8 hours and getting an education. So we also need to stop letting people believe, and I've seen many brothers be guilty of that. Stop letting people believe that it's cool just to walk around with your gun because you're minus information and they're gonna put your dumb ass in prison and you're gonna wind up coming home, even if you don't go for a long time, you're gonna wind up coming home, you're gonna minus your ability to carry, you ain't gonna be able to get a job, your family's gonna be crippled in the whole 9 yards. Only because the state was smart enough to say, do what y'all want. But now getting the education is up to you. And I'm not gonna protect you if you don't have my permit. And we got a lot of people running around now carrying a gun with no knowledge and information, and a lot of them are catching cases. A lot of them. It ain't hot news. Why would I put every case like that on the news? What's that gonna do? That's gonna make y'all go out and get a concealed carry permit. Now, I don't want that. I need you to remain ignorant, right? So that's how the gun laws are affecting us nowadays, man. And I kind of covered a couple of the things I think we should do early on, but one of the big things, we need to make sure that our city leaders are being held liable for their role in it. So I know I rambled on for probably an hour there, so I'll take any questions. My bad.
Hey, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
You kicked a lot of knowledge on the history. Do you have a reading list or some books that you can throw out? Hold on, let me get my notebook. Some books that you can throw out there that we can possibly read and learn.
Yes, one of them is. I put a lot of my books up.
Now, you be careful, it already cost you enough money, Kevin.
If you haven't read the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, read that. Also, you can read the Knights of Tabor. That's Tabor.
Hold on. Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, Frederick Douglass, the autobiography of Frederick Douglass.
Okay.
The Knights of Tabor. That's a book by Moses Dixon.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the other one. Hold on. I got some of my books. They're not in there. I normally keep them around. Man, it's the other one about the Underground Railroad. Start with those are two good ones to start with, and I'm missing. I'm off the top of my head. I'm trying to remember the names of the other ones.
Can I interject here for a second on some books?
Yeah, and here's another one. This one's pretty good. This one is Remembering Slavery.
I got that one.
This one, yeah, it's a really good book.
Yeah.
And that's the one I'm reading now, so I got the other one to put up. But I would say start with those three, and then another some great sources. They're not reading material. I know that was your question, but in lieu of remembering the exact name of the books, I don't want to give you wrong titles. Another great source would be to go watch, and I mean the professional documentaries on Black Wall Street on YouTube. There are some really, really good documentaries on YouTube on Black Wall Street. And watch those. Let's see, what's another good one to
Negroes with Guns.
Negroes with
Guns to
Guns.
Defend.
Yeah, that's a good one.
This nonviolent stuff to get you killed.
I got that one.
I'm looking on my Kindle. Hold on.
That's cool.
Can I interject here for a second here? Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
I just want to, if you want some more history as far as the state of Missouri goes, John A. Wright, Sr., he wrote a Black American History series, which is downtown St. Louis. The Black Americans are downtown St. Louis, the Ville neighborhood, Kinloch, of course, and several other different books that he's actually Extraordinary Black Missourians. That covers a whole bunch, and his name is, he was an educator here in St. Louis. He used to, I think, was superintendent over Normandy School District there for a while, and his name is John A. Wright, Sr. If you want to know about the history of St. Louis, this is really history of St. Louis and the state of Missouri. This guy, I mean, he's really covered the whole area. You know, when you talk about Moses Dixon, and it's just some of the, all the way from 1799, the blacks that were in the St. Louis area and the Missouri area, I mean, he covers them all, believe me. So that's just some of the books that you can actually get. And of course, I just heard Negro with Guns. If you don't own that book, that's what you get. I mean, that's just the bottom line book.
Yeah, I got that one.
Robert F. Williams, by the way.
Yeah,
Thank you.
while we're on the subject, this kind of ties into my first question, because this is one of the main reasons why I called in. I wanted to know what other black gun clubs were doing to introduce like these Black historical materials into their curriculums, into their gun club meetings. Like, I'm looking for not only books and things of that nature, but I want to present more of these at our gun club meetings. So are there any PowerPoint presentations that anyone has together or anything like that that we could share amongst ourselves?
Well, I actually personally own, can you hear me? I actually
Yes, I
personally
can hear you.
just about every Black documentary that ever's been produced.
Okay.
Probably about 3-4 terabytes, and I mean terabytes, not gigabytes.
Okay.
And a lot of the club members, I share a lot of that information with them. All you just need is a flash drive and you have the information.
Okay. Okay. What's your name, sir, so I can contact you offline so I can basically try to get some of this and have a conversation about that material?
Okay. Name is Vaughn Sanders. Name's up there. You can contact me by email at vsand2250@gmail.com.
Volume up.
Is my
All right.
volume okay?
Got it. Yeah, you're fine. Vaughn
Okay.
Sanders. Okay, got you. Got you. Thank you, sir.
All righty.
I do, but they were kind of hurting my ears.
The second question I was going to ask, because it kind of ties into this as well, what are a lot of the local gun, or a lot of your gun clubs doing to introduce the legal aspect of the education into their curricula? Because that's something I really tend to focus on. And in fact, late last year, I had representatives of U.S. Law Shield come into our gun club meeting, one, to promote their materials and carry insurance, that's another conversation, but two, to give people that unfettered access to like a legal advocate so they can ask a lot of, legal questions. Because the problem I run into when trying to talk to people that are new to firearms, especially a lot of our people that are new and think they know everything, is that they get kind of angry when I try to talk about the legal aspect of firearms, because they don't know and people don't know what they don't know. Because like the first things I tell them is you need to know if you have a permit, what states it's valid in if you decide to travel, what are the restrictions in that state, and what are the prohibited places, because gun laws aren't the same everywhere. And that always throws people into a tizzy. Well, I thought that we had a constitutional right to 2A. Anyway, I don't want to digress, but I was just kind of curious how other gun clubs are bringing that legal education piece into their curricula, into their club meetings.
Cal, I'll kind of answer that also. And this is
Sure.
Zulu Shooters Club I'm speaking about. We have on our private Facebook page, all of that, there's Missouri laws, the state of Illinois laws, some of the state troopers. We also had some information from lawyers here in St. Louis about what you can do, the difference between concealed carry and concealed carrying with the permit and without it. We also present that at our meetings, but if all our members have access to PDF files that they can download and get that information off our private Facebook page.
That's a good idea. Okay.
In the interim, I actually hate giving this site out because I don't want people to abuse it because they think that they can read it and be a lawyer. But if you guys want to keep the site, it's a site called Handgun Laws. It's handgunlaws.us.
Yeah.
And that's a really good site that's not used enough, but that's even good for not only your students, but even for the clubs, but you as individuals. So if you ever want to travel to a state, there's a color-coded map and it will tell you the laws about like if your permit's valid there, if it's not valid there, and et cetera.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Actually I got a recommendation. It was, I guess, piggybacking on your handgun law site. Last year when I got my CCW, I downloaded this, and I'm not sure if it's on Android or not, but I know it's on iPhone. It's just called CCW, but it gives the same. I think it gives the same information as far as like reciprocity and like particular state laws, and I think it's like $3 to own. So that's on the iPhone App Store if you guys got an iPhone.
Yeah, there's several apps out there. Yeah.
Can you hear me? I have a question. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Question I have is, has KD, have you looked in partnering with the Missouri Department of Conservation with doing the educational piece? Because I volunteered there for about 2 or 3 years, strictly in the shotgun and rifle pistol areas out there in Forest 44. And they tried to get into the city to have meaningful conversation about presenting firearm safety to them, plus they were turned down. But in the county, and specifically St. Charles, Jefferson County, and some parts of St. Louis County, they've got high schools that are going to training. We train, I don't know how many students from St. Charles school districts, over 2,000 or 3,000 students in firearm safety and all, with no problem. And I thought that was a good model for the city of St. Louis to look at. And I don't know why they resisted, but I was just wondering, which your points you brought forth were pretty good, but I think the educational piece presented in a very neutral manner might get them convinced that maybe it isn't the way to go from an educational standpoint, instead of saying, well, you're promoting use of firearms. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, the only problem with that is, and it doesn't even matter if Missouri Department of Conservation. St. Louis City is, owned and operated by the city. It receives as far as education goes, it does receive money from the state, but that is a contained budget from the state, and the state gets it from the federal level. So I say all that to say the state doesn't really have power over the local school districts like that. The superintendent is the ultimate ruler, and that superintendent ain't letting nobody nowhere near there talking about guns. And I know that because I adopt classrooms in city schools every year. And as long as I'm coming in, talking to the kids, talking to their parents, and we're not discussing guns, it's all good. But they, in a very polite way, monitor me to make sure we're not talking about guns. So now there are a couple of charter school districts that are a little bit more relaxed with it because they want people to be safe. With the KIPP Charter School District is one I've been to their high school. And they were there talking about mental illness, and they allowed me to talk about guns and pass on the card and stuff like that. But the city schools themselves, that superintendent has the ultimate power, and he only answers to the mayor. They are not letting that happen.
Right.
They just are not. And they don't, and MDC doesn't have any, they don't have a pool. They don't have no power. Like, it's different with the governor's office that wanted it, then maybe, but MDC doesn't have that kind of power over the city. So they're just, until those leaders change, they're not gonna let it happen. And I know that, and it's a good point you bring up, but I know that just because I've been at this with them, like in this fight with them for about 12 years now.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, they're just not gonna let it. They're not gonna let it happen. It's the same way that they treated the same way when Missouri passed the fact that we can arm teachers in our school under Senate Bill 656. They kind of treat it the same way. The St. Louis City won't allow teachers to be armed, right? Because they still can hold that power. And so they didn't want teachers to be armed. They didn't even want one teacher to be armed, the principal. They said that's why we have security, and we're not letting anybody, they don't want nothing to do with guns. They are very, very strict about that.
Wow.
Yeah. Very strict. I couldn't even pass out, show you how strict they are. I couldn't give out Eddie Eagle pamphlets.
Wow. Yeah. If there's anything that the NRA is good for, that's how I got into it. I'm a life member with NRA, and it was strictly through safety because I handle firearms for almost 45 years, and I don't espouse to their what they're spitting out now. But back when it was just strictly for firearm safety and how to handle arms and that sort of thing. But that was perfect. I mean, my son and everyone I came across, I gave them those pamphlets. They were great. I mean, basic firearm safety, how to use them, how to protect, how to keep them safe and all. And that's just unreal that no one wants to use that as a benchmark to start letting people know how to be safe around firearms.
Now, unfortunately, with the way that these guys operate, and I'm not a yeller and a screamer when I'm having a dope exchange with individuals. I'm very methodical and thought out and present facts and information. But what I've come to is the fact that from a political standpoint, outside of the superintendent, from a political standpoint, there is no money in the cure.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then from the superintendent, that's where their power and money comes from, is from the political sphere. So whatever they say, they do. So that's why we're.
Gotcha.
Did Senate Bill 656 pass into law?
Oh yeah, it's been a law several years now.
Okay, and that allows teachers to be armed in the classroom?
Yep, it's one of the provisions of it. Yep. Now, can you do it? It's up to the school.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the school has to approve it.
Okay.
And actually, the way that works is that whatever police district that school sits in, so whoever the police area is, not only does the school have to approve it, that police department writes the curriculum. So the school will have to approve it. The police department will have to write the curriculum. The teacher has to pay for it. So it's like, you know, and then when you're gonna go, and so I think one state said that I forget who that was, they passed it, and the police department, who was basically under the political power of the local mayor, wrote it to where you had to do like 120 hours of training. And they put it, they was like, and you can only come while we're open. So they made essentially the training hours the same as the school hours. So you would have to like almost go unpaid for 120 hours to even go take the training. It was crazy. Like, yeah, it ain't easy. We do have some schools, like down in the Boot Hill around the Ozarks, the Boot Hill, the Ozarks, and some small counties around Kansas do have armed teachers, but I haven't heard anybody else.
Oh, I got a question for the general population out there. I've got to get my CCW renewed, and because of the pandemic, I couldn't go into the, I guess it's the sheriff's department now, right? In the county, or I go to the St. Louis County Police to get my renewal. Is that correct?
Well, where do you live?
I live in Florida, unincorporated St. Louis County.
Yeah, so you'll go down on Forsyth.
Of course. Are they open? I mean, are they open now? Anyone know if they're finally open?
We have to check.
No,
when did your license expire?
They're not open?
Yeah, when did it expire?
It expired in April. And
that's fine. You have 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and they put out that the governor put out the information that if your CCW expires, you can get it renewed as soon as the courts open up with no questions asked.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks.
I have a question for KD. KD, I appreciate the conversation, very informative. I'm not sure if you touched on this, but whatever happened to the Knights of Liberty organization, number one, but then number two, did they ever coincide with the rise of the KKK in the South?
I never, now that they have, I'll work my way backwards. Did they ever have any conflict with white nationalists at that time known as the KKK? Yes. Are there any documented large battles that I personally read about that I can confirm? No. But are there minor conflicts? Sure. But like big battles where like dozens of people were killed or anything like that, I've never read anything like that. As far as the Knights of Liberty go, Moses Dixon, so I talked about how that big segment broke off and went to the Union Army. Moses Dixon himself went to start, which I guess I should have touched on. I'm glad you asked me that. He went to he was also passionate about women's rights. So he went to start the Daughters of Tabor, and he started women's education. And so the groups kind of like, they slowly, just kind of went their own separate ways. So he went to focus on the Daughters of Tabor and actually started an organization for them, and then started a college in Missouri known as Lincoln University. So his focus became education and the betterment of people and women's rights and equal rights. And so his soldiers, the ones that didn't go to the Union Army, it just seems like they just kind of just all went off into the wind. Are we froze?
No, I don't think so, Katie. I have a
That's
question for
it.
you.
Okay, go ahead.
Actually, I have one for you. Because our Second Amendment rights are so intertwined with everything political, what do you see as solutions outside of the grassroots efforts of trying to convert those folks who are on the fence about firearms ownership and the Second Amendment. What do you see as an effective way to combat a lot of the political stuff we find ourselves in? And part two of that is, do we see Kevin KD Dixie in politics in 10, 15, 20 years down the road?
Man, look, I tell you what, I work my way backwards with that too. Look, I don't know about y'all, but I've done some stuff. I don't know if I want them digging in my past like that. I don't know. Politics, politics, a whole different ball game when it comes to people getting in your business. I'm not personally interested in politics. I will make an admission here, though. I will tell you guys a first thing that I believe I've kind of decided on within the last couple of weeks. I think that there was an opportunity for me to do a little more. I don't know if it's best served in a political spirit, but I am going to go ahead and really contemplate grabbing a law degree to help our people that way. And that'll be my way of fighting. And obviously with a law degree, you can mess around with politics. And I don't know if I want to be an alder person because you kind of sucked in what you can do and what you can say, right? So as far as what we can do politically, honestly, because my story doesn't have to be everybody's, if you can take office, get that, man. If you can get like a local city spot, on your, hell, even if you start out in your neighborhood association, like any political spot you can get, if there's an opportunity for you, please grab that, because your struggle might not be my struggle. I just don't want to do it, but you might be great at it, right? So there's that. And then the biggest thing is stop letting people politically use you. I have no problem telling someone at all, like, I don't care what color you wear. These are my interests. I am not a one issue voter, but if we can't agree on this one issue, I ain't really gonna listen to nothing else you got to say. So if that makes sense, like, right, you can't promise me, oh, we're gonna make sure that the grass is cut and that you guys have a reduction of taxes, but you taking my guns? Like, I can't even listen to the other stuff you say. I've noticed firsthand when I've been in a room with some of these like state level politicians, and especially local ones, if you get them in a room and you have a conversation with them, you put, especially the ones that are interested in depriving you of your rights, you put them in a position because they always want to make sure they're pandering to you in a way and showing you that they care. And so when it comes to guns, if you do a brief, like clearly we've been talking for a couple hours, but if you do a real brief speech to them about the history of it and the fact that you care about that, what I've noticed is they can't respond, right? Because if you say, well, because Timmy got shot in school and we need to ban guns, and then you sit there and you say, yeah, I get that. However, historically, we've lost 20, 50,000 people because of the lack of gun ownership, and those people look like me, and this is what I'm trying to do. They can't look at you and say, those 20,000 people don't matter. They can't. So what they normally do is get real quiet and then start asking for private conversations. I can tell you, and I shared this with a Missouri politician. I shared this on Instagram minus the name. I did that exact thing. And I just had a civil conversation with this young lady, and we talked, and we had a real good chat. And she had some pretty good questions, and I did my best to answer them. And I got a text one night, right around 11 o'clock at night, and she said, hey, can I toss your name in the hat for support for my state representative seat? And I responded back, gun friendly. That's all I put. And I shared that text on social media. And she responded back, yes, before I had a conversation with you and understood the history of it, I had no idea, right? And so that was one representative that got at least changed on the gun and has held up to that since then, right? Because I watch her, right? Has held up to that. And what happened is I wound up getting invited into rooms with other people. I put up a video on YouTube, and I titled it Into the Lion's Den. And it was me sitting in a room with 30 anti-gun politicians by myself. And I had a conversation with them in a way that only thing they could ask me was real general questions like, well, should I be scared if I go to certain areas with a gun? Like real general stuff. But anything about gun control, they all backed down. Like at 30 of them. And nobody could say anything to me, because when you meet them with education and the same emotional attachment, if you're going to tell me that I need to care about what you consider to be an atrocity, then you're going to have to tell me that you don't care about what I consider to be an atrocity. And where do we go from there? Because if you open your mouth and say, I don't care about that, you ain't gonna get your election seat anyway. Because by the time I tell all the other black people that you want to vote for you, that you don't care about what happened to a slaughter of people, you ain't getting that seat back. So education, talking to them softly. And I know I'm the wrong person to say this. I'm gonna sound like a hypocrite because I will go in on somebody real quick. But when I'm in a room with somebody and we're having a civil discourse, that is not the same as social media, right? We're actually having conversations. So I think that they aren't used to people being civil, because if you look at a lot of white America, it's normally plate carriers, AR-15s, more aggressive, protests. With us, we already can't be aggressive as it is, right? Not in person anyway. So if you can actually sit down and educate them, a part of them has never got a chance to really hear it in person from that perspective. And if you can walk in the room and do that and make them face the facts that they are actually hurting the people that they claim to love, it will at least shut them up for the moment and give them something to think about.
Great, man. Hey, thanks for that insight, and congratulations on your decision to pursue that law degree. Best of luck, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I did bring the truth guns, 3 of them out. I don't know if y'all want to see the cases. I don't know if everybody's seen them.
Break it out.
Yeah, let's see it.
Check it out.
So,
I don't mind seeing it again. It's an HK.
Yeah, the only one I don't have up there as far as cases is the Rosewood case. But outside of the Rosewood case, I do have the big case. So this is the travel case that I go around with when I want to talk about a lot of them. So trying to move this thing right. So this is the original. This is the Black Wall Street. Right. So that is the case. Black Wall Street, clearly up there it says, Kevin Dixie presents the truth. But this is the Black Wall Street case. Now, the cool thing about these cases, now, obviously, here's the gun. Get that out of there. Hold on one sec. Let me stand this up. Right. So this is the actual gun. So this is the all black truth, which has been the most popular one recently. But this gun has a custom stipple. So if you're familiar with the HK platform, it comes with optional swells, and also it comes with the swells and the back strap that are different sizes. So instead of molding the grip together, all of these actually come custom stippled to match. So you can swap them out for different hand sizes and still get the same texture. Clearly the undercut for the hand reference. HKs have a habit for the European mag release of being a little slippery. So there's actually a curvature we added to it, and then custom stippled mag release as well. I don't know if that's showing up well on camera. And that is textured to match the grip. Up top, what we did, sorry, once again on the frame, I'm sorry, we put a Lobos industry trigger in it, which is the best aftermarket trigger for HK. It's not many of them anyway, but that's the best one for it. This particular gun is running an M-Force APL, but you can put any light and any optic on the gun you want. You don't have to be restricted to these. The slide itself has a little bit of actually a lot going on it, to be honest with you. So for a grip, this is a gun that's meant to fight. This is not just a gun, try to get in some more lighter. It's not a gun just meant to be a safe queen or anything like that. This gun is meant to fight. So all the serrations on the firearm, which might be hard to see in this light, all the serrations are doubled, machine doubled from the factory to give you more aggressive texture. We actually, especially if you don't have the one with the threaded magazine, it's easy. The threaded barrel is easy to see. The custom bevel, the gun here. So those custom bevels allow you to do one-handed manipulations off any surface that you run into, right? So mine is actually scratched up from doing so. So if you go one-handed techniques, you get a corner of a step or a piece of 2x4 or a good sharp rock, you can actually do one-handed manipulations. We have the window cuts in here and also the coffin cut. These are not in here just for appearance. These things were placed into a gravity machine to allow the sickle rate of the gun to slightly increase, but definitely not hurting it, and allowing the internal parts to work perfect with the gun. I did not switch out anything internally in this gun. That reason being, if I go in and put a special spring in this gun because I reduced your slide or did something crazy to it to really throw it off, what's going to happen if you do actually go shoot your gun and you get 15,000 rounds and your spring wears down? Well, now you got to find that one particular spring to make sure that your gun functions well. And dealing with HK, sometimes the parts can be really complex to find. So I wanted to stick to what's readily available, which is all the factory parts. So we designed the slide to be able to work perfectly the way we wanted it to off what's internally inside the gun. We clean the parts up a little bit, polish them up, but you don't get any grit and grime, but you can easily replace them, get a bevel machine, and have them back into working order yourself. Let's see what else we do. This one has Heine front suppressor sights on it. I'm sorry, front and rear suppressor sights. Obviously, that is a Vortex Viper that's sitting on the top of it. That is a 6 MOA dot. I prefer the 6 MOA over the 3. That's just my personal choice. On the side of the gun, you have the truth, and you'll see those 3 holes there. I am a Christian man. Those 3 holes do stand for the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's just a way of understanding that before you depress or use this against anybody, that you are in good grace with whoever you think is your higher power. And before you do something, if you go to work, you're actually doing it for good reason. You're not using it for the wrong purpose. So that is the gun itself. Then on top of it, we obviously have the NOC logo. The threaded barrel in here is a silencer code threaded barrel. The guns come with 2 barrels. You get the factory barrel and you get the silencer code barrel, and you have the option of getting the factory barrel ported. So if you wanted to run this gun ported, you could, and it'll just come with your gun for no additional cost. So that is the truth. They all come with 2 magazines. And I will say this, if you're into HK's ETS, Elite Tactical Systems, has magazines that are running really, really, really inexpensive for these guns right now. Instead of $45, you can get one for like $17. So it's a pretty good deal. But that is the truth firearm. This particular gun that I'm holding in my hand has right about 29,000 rounds to it so far. And this particular one has been in the hands of some of the best shooters around the country. It had to pass their torture test before I will release them to the public, and it did. The case for this one, see if I can get it over here. There it is. What people don't realize about the case is when you pick the gun up out the case, there's actually more wording, all right? That wording there gives my account of what happened in Black Wall Street. And it just says, gun laws are based in hatred and racism. Historical moments like Black Wall Street will expose lies and make non-believers conform to the truth. And then I signed each one of them. And then below it, which is gonna be kind of hard to see in this light, this is giving you all the stats of what occurred. I'm breaking it down to actually factually tell you what occurred. Here, every truth gun comes with an M-Force TFX, so you get a handheld flashlight that is Cerakoted to match your gun. It comes with it, and then you have the spots for your magazines on either side. We also have, which people don't get to see a lot, well, this one is the actual, this one here is from East St. Louis, 1917. This design here is the actual newspaper that was thrown out that morning. This is the same exact print, word for word, of what happened the next morning when they threw it out to tell everybody about it. All right, so that says 250 Negroes shot, burned, clubbed to death in East St. Louis race war. Negroes leaving East St. Louis under protection of militiamen, and that was the National Guard. That was St. Louis Globe, and that was on Tuesday morning, 1917. That's when the paper cost you 2 cents. I wish something else costs 2 cents now, but that was back then. This one is actually, this gun is a one-off, but this is the SK version of it. So this is the sub-compact version of the gun. Everything is the same as far as the slide cuts. This one does not have an RMR cut on it. You can have that option. I'm not a big fan of RMR cuts on sub-compact guns, but you can add that option. Everything else is exactly the same. The only thing with this one is this is a one-off paint job and the sights are different. These are Trigicon sights that are sitting on top of this particular model, but this is a one-off gun. This is a gun I had custom done. There will only be one in this color, and this is gonna go to my baby girl. So this is gonna be her gun that she frames up that her daddy designed. So this is a one-off. I probably won't ever even shoot this one. But the East St. Louis case is available for the other guns. And this one here says, freedom is paid for in blood. You can't return our dead and we will not return our freedom. That's what that says inside of there. And then that's giving you more stats on what occurred in East St. Louis, which is all a great Google or listen to any one of the documentaries about them. It's pretty great. They're all pretty factual. And then over here, which is gonna be really hard to see, this one is probably one of my favorites. This is the Underground Railroad. Obviously, we know it wasn't a real railroad, right? But this is the Underground Railroad running through a cotton field. Here we actually have a family running. We have the slave catcher over here chasing them. I know it's hard to see with this camera. All these doves, some of them are in 3D, some of them are flat, but there are 20 birds flying free over on this art. Each bird represents roughly 5,000 slaves for the 100,000 slaves that were freed. So that's what the birds represent. This family is continuing. This is the red and black shirt. This is the one that's readily available. If you don't like it in all black, this is the red and black. But the family is continuing their run through the swamps, which is where a lot of us had to hide, on their route to freedom. And then here, I have the quote from Harriet Tubman. I've seen hundreds of escaped slaves, but I've never seen one willing to go back to be a slave. Then we have the slave collar that's on the slave himself, right, which represents gun control in this case. So that is, and then I have the Rosewood case, which I don't have up here currently on me. I couldn't get it out in time before the live started. But the Rosewood case is important because it actually is the most graphic case because I actually have black men hanging from the trees in that case. But that's what they did, so that's what I put. America was really taken back by that. A lot of people wouldn't even put it in their gun magazines because the imagery was too hard for them to absorb. They just couldn't, their hearts couldn't stomach it. But so those are the true pistols, and they are, just for historical purposes, these guns are roughly halfway sold out, and they are the first guns ever that have ever told not only any story, but these are the first gun to ever tell our story, period. All right, so I told the Second Amendment community that if I'm gonna be here doing this, we need some representation. And I think that the Truth Pistol did a real good job of telling our story and bringing us to the table. These Zooms are so weird when y'all on mute. It's like, okay.
All righty, Katie. We really appreciate you, all the information, all the knowledge you handed down us today. And hopefully we can get members to follow up on the history of this, the gun rights in America, and also the second, it's the Second Amendment, actually proactive on supporting the Second Amendment. But that's something the Zulu Shooters Club has always kind of tried to do. I'm not sure if there's any other questions. I'm not going to shut it down. As long as people have questions, Katie's here to answer, but it's been going on a couple of hours. Just however you guys feel, just chime in.
What's the best way to find you? Website?
The website, I'll warn you, it's under construction. It's nootherchoice.net, just spelled out, nootherchoice.net. As far as every other platform, it's just literally at The Real NLC. That's YouTube, that's Facebook, Instagram, oh, not yours.
Okay, are you still doing the Evolve series of pistols? Because I'd like to know when you're doing 2 and 3.
Yeah, I'm actually going to work on those and announce those tonight or tomorrow morning. So because of COVID, I pulled the schedule, right? Because crap was going to happen. But I will be having, obviously we had to move the Train and Learn event to 2021. So the next Evolve Rifle 1 and 2 class I just confirmed last night. Evolve 1 Rifle will be conducted on May 23rd in DeSoto, Missouri, and Evolve 2 Pistol, if you've taken Evolve 1 Pistol from me, you can qualify to take it. It is going to be conducted on May 24th.
May 24th?
Which is a Sunday, I believe.
Right. How much is that?
Evolve 2 Pistol is $225, and Evolve 1 Rifle is $200.
Okay.
But any alumni gets will get a $50 coupon off. Okay,
because I'm an alumni for Evolve 1 and Pistol and Rifle.
Correct. So you get 50. Any alum, once you take any one class, you get the $50 off. So yep, that will qualify.
Okay. Cool.
Yep. So if you and if you want to take the course, once I announce them, all you have to do is send me a DM or a message and say, yo, I'm gonna sign up, and then I'll send the code out. People were getting real reckless with codes. They started sharing them. So right. I'm making them unique to the individual now. So I'll send the code out unique to the individual that it can be used for that particular event.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Okay, looks like we're going to go and wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody for joining today and taking the time out of the day just to, come up on a little bit of knowledge here of what's going on in KDU's life. And we want to really let's give a warm welcome to No Other Choice, Kevin Dixie, for taking time out in his busy day also to present this information to us.